Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, first part thereof for the 7th of October 2025. We are going to look at the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply of course. You can find them linked in the description below. We have over 1,000 personnel lost, so that is a fairly significant number. I think it ticked up yesterday after a day or so down in the 800s, and then it was a really significant uptick yesterday, and it's kept up there again today. 3 tanks and 6 troop carrying AFVs. There were a few more of those yesterday lost too, and although that's not a significant number in either of those categories, it is more than the kind of zeros and ones we've been seeing for some time. 29 artillery systems is also a bigger number there, so that is once again above the daily average. 1 piece of anti-aircraft warfare system, one anti-aircraft warfare system indeed, so that's good news there. 79 vehicles and fuel tanks, below 100, but still a pretty decent number of bits of kit being blown up, and 2 pieces of special equipment. So lots of I guess, well, I say lots of equipment spread across a number of categories actually is way lower than we have seen it at the height of interactions between the two. So yeah, not quite sure what to make of the frontline losses, the loss statistics as we're seeing them at the moment. I think weather has played a bit of a part, but all the videos I'm seeing at the moment show a pretty nice climate in along the front lines. Sun is shining, the leaves look dry, we haven't got any serious mud or anything, no wind or cloud cover, and I'm presuming that footage is from the last few days, and that could be why the troop numbers have gone up in the last couple of days. Okay, let's look at another couple. In fact, here's a good example of that. Here's a 2.5 minute video that shows you that the conditions are pretty decent. And this video apparently shows 50 Russian soldiers. Well, it doesn't show that, but it's to do with some activity around, I think, Zhitelny, which is Novopavlivska direction. So Pokrovsk down south, and it's the one area, if you saw my mapping update yesterday, it's one area below Pokrovsk where the Ukrainians have retaken 3 villages there. Sosnivka, Zhitelny, and another one. And that is quite rare for that area, because actually that's been a whole sector where the Russians have had a lot of joy recently, taking consistently actually over the last sort of year, taking land after land after land. Ever since Mariinka fell, they seem to have just been able to march on without being halted in a major way, like Pokrovsk has halted the Russians. So here there is a fight back by the Ukrainians, and this video apparently entails activity whereby 50 Russian soldiers were eliminated, 8 of them were captured, and these were assault operations of the 141st Separate Mechanized Brigade there, the village of Zhitelny, throwing up some flags as well. Now, Ukrainian drones, here's a montage, 1 minute 40 of montage of Russian soldiers getting taken out by these drones, this time of the Rarog 427th Separate Regiment of the Unmanned Systems Forces, the Rarog unit, who are held in pretty high regard when it comes to drone usage. They finish in the top 10, top 5 usually, I think, of points accrued on a monthly basis. Points win prizes. Why I've included this video is you quite often see these quite often see these montages, but just the sheer number from this one unit of people taken out, and then you refer back to images that, these daily figures that say 1,020 killed, wounded, POW, deserted, missing. That is a justifiable number when you just see one unit take out an absolute host of people. And now we don't know for sure what happens to these people as the drones hit, because they're cut out, but you can assume they are going to be injured to some degree, at the very least. Then we hear Tim White says 322 Ukrainian soldiers have been executed by Russia since the war began. That's according to Prosecutor General, who says 59 were murdered in the Olenivka prison massacre and another 263 killed on the battlefield after surrendering. Ukrinform's exclusive is translated, and you can go and read that on Tim White's thread. I will put them up here just in case you want to have a look at it. So that is a pretty staggering number because, of course, each one of those pretty much is a war crime. Just hundreds of war crimes just in this one context that the Russians have committed. Just heinous activity. Right, Igor Sushko says nearly 1,000 soldiers have been court-martialed for murder, Russian soldiers this is, since 2023 alone. According to available public records, the number of cases increased by a factor of 10 since mobilization began in September 2022, excludes murders by veterans as those are handled by civilian courts. So I presume these are mainly going to be murders of other soldiers, but it could also entail being court-martialed for murdering civilians as well. So I'm not 100% sure. I'm just intuitively think it's more likely to be a case of court-martial. Well, actually, will it be? Yeah, well, you can make up your own determination there. But point is that the Russians have become considerably more murderous as soldiers since 2023 began. That uptick from 2022 to 2023 is phenomenal there, and not in a good way. That's some Mediat Zona data coming through. What else do we have? Operators of the 412th Unmanned Systems Brigade, the Nemesis Group, in cooperation with the State Border Guard Service, struck and destroyed a rare Russian R-330Zh Zhitel, the Zhitel electronic warfare station. I've shown you a number of these getting taken out before. In fact, I believe 23 of these have been destroyed previously. I think this is the 24th, or maybe 23 in total. This is significant. Zhitels are not cheap. So cost Zhitel EW. Let's have a look at that, and let's see what Copilot tells us. Let it think a little bit. Yeah, so $10 million. So these are not cheap, and they are electronic warfare assets. They are valuable. They can block quite a lot of equipment from being used. This is really good result for the Ukrainians. Another Zhitel taken out, but 24 maybe in total, something like that. That's $250 million worth of equipment. Of course, it's not really how much it cost. The value is in, whether they can, it's the function they provide and whether they can actually be replaced. So if Russia can't build this stuff now in the middle of the war, then it's kind of priceless in a sense. Right. They have also lost a radar to an S-400 system, as according to this video, and it shows the targeting of the radar and not of the launchers here. And I think that tells you that's an important lesson there, in that these launchers are contingent upon the operation of the radars, and if you lose your radar, you can argue that you're going to lose the ability to fire your missiles. So there are 3 vehicles there. One appears to have received a direct hit. I wonder if that had damaged any of the other 2 vehicles there as well. But anyway, sort of thing you'd like to see multiple rockets hit and then, or missiles hit and then hit the launchers as well. That would be good, wouldn't it? But anyway, that's a bit of good news. This is fascinating, this video. So Laser Group says here, shows another hit on transport loading vehicle for the Buk air defense system. Now, I'm not quite sure actually what does happen here. I don't know if there is a hit, but this is a fascinating video. This is 1 minute 40 video of a drone that actually lands, and we've seen this before. This drone lands on a Buk, and the claim is it's a transloader for the Buk system there. It lands in the middle of those missiles, and I think, does it face backwards or does it face forwards? And then it just details everything that happens for ages. I don't know whether it's facing forwards there, but it seems to have some kind of gimbal or something whereby it can look in multiple directions here. Quite incredible, unless it's got multiple cameras, but there's probably some pretty useful intelligence that could come out of this. So the operators obviously didn't know. It lands on the vehicle and then it goes along for 15 kilometers, follows another vehicle, then these all park up, and then you have some other vehicle comes nearby, and then people getting out. You really get to see, you know, how they're all operating, so on and so forth. And then it appears that they work out that they're being looked at. They're trying to hit this drone with a stick, and then they'll run away. You know, filming it on a mobile, and then, well, obviously some indication it's going to blow up. But we don't know. It just cuts out there. So I think it's a stretch to say it hit a transport loading vehicle. It certainly landed on it. I presume it detonated then. I wonder why it waited for the people to run away before detonating, though. That's a bit bizarre. Anyway, there was that video. What else? Destruction of a ground robotic complex and other equipment by the R-330Zh Brigade, another fairly useful Ukrainian brigade here. Now, this is significant. Why am I showing you this one? Because actually we are starting to see more and more UGVs caught on these videos, destroyed by equipment. I've seen a whole load recently. I haven't really shown you any of them. I kind of pick and choose what I try and show you. But here we have various equipment, including UGVs, getting taken out by the Khartia group here. So again, you can go and check this kind of footage out to your heart's content and go and see things getting blown up and targeted and what have you. Another fascinating, tiny little video here, actually, but these are Ukrainian naval drones becoming platforms for supposedly unjammable fiber optic drones here. Yeah, I guess we can do without the music. Now, we know that they used one similar to this, not exactly that. They were in these little hangars, weren't they, on a Magura drone when they sent them to Tuapse. But here we have a much more simple setup whereby a boat possibly traveling towards Crimea, maybe traveling towards the coast or up the coast along Kherson Oblast, I don't know, but there you have an USV carrying a bunch of UAVs, and the UAVs look fairly sizable there. Look like they're packing a little bit of a punch. If you look at this one, you know, that's a quadcopter, but that's carrying quite a bit there. I don't know whether those are individual bombs or whether, yeah, I presume these are returnable. These are dropping munitions, and then you wouldn't want to lose those drones if at all possible. I do wonder whether these kind of outfits are expected to return. So these large quadcopters then fly back to the boat, get back on board, and then the boat pilots its way back to the Ukrainians. I don't know. Now, these sorts of videos are out every day, it appears. This is a building getting absolutely shellacked by, I presume, a guided glide bomb, but who knows. A Ukrainian MiG-29 carried out a precision strike in Oleksivka up in the Sumy region, destroying a building housing Russian personnel, and that building was absolutely destroyed. But as someone pointed out yesterday, I did a small thread, just a few comments from Intel Schizo on the parity of artillery shell expenditure. So both sides at the moment using about the same amounts of shells, if you believe this data and if it's correct, and etc, etc. But as someone pointed out, the original data from Clément Mollin, who's a French mapper, Mollin, he actually talks about guided glide bombs as well, and that's an important point, that although there is parity now, arguably, between Russia and Ukraine in terms of firing artillery ammunition, which is incredible, because there were some claims that the Russians were firing 10-1 earlier on in war, 60,000 shells, and the Ukrainians firing some sort of 6,000 or whatever. Now it's looking like both sides have parity in artillery ammunition use. But guided glide bombs, Ukraine are going to be nowhere near. And so, I can show you a building getting blown up by the Ukrainians, and often do, but I try and caveat that with the Russians are doing this too, and by the way, they're doing a lot more. We just don't always see all the imagery of it, and that will be a selection bias on my sources, no doubt. But since the beginning of the year, 35,141 bombs have been dropped, as well as the 1,488,990 artillery shells, and 923,047 drone strikes. I mean, we can do some simple maths there to see if these numbers are correct, how many of that would equate to per day. So that equates to no, that's not, that's since the beginning of the year. Actually, how many days are we into the year? So if I take that to sort of the end of September, I mean, these are really sort of rough, and his figures, you don't know how accurate his figures are, but assuming everything's accurate and we're taking it to the end of September, works out about 130 guided glide bombs a day. We have about 5,300, maybe 5,500 artillery shells a day, and then about 3,400 odd drones a day. That is absolutely insane. But there you go. So that is those are numbers of guided glide bombs, for example, 130 a day, that Ukraine can only dream of. They are, some are claiming they're, dropping, maybe a couple of plane loads a day. What was the other day? On average, like 1.6 sorties or something. I don't know. You are talking a handful of bombs, whereas Russia are doing 130 a day. It's just not even in the same ballpark. Now, I don't know, maybe the Ukrainians are dropping more than that, and I can't talk to the accuracy of these numbers, but the Ukrainians have a long way to go, which is why I keep talking about Ukraine needs another 70 planes, and they need to be absolutely hammering the front lines. I was saying to Pierre yesterday on a thread where we're talking about, where we're at and whatnot, and I was like, yeah, it's all about distance strikes, about missiles and drones and blah blah blah, but it's about planes, and a load of planes. They need to do what Russia did to Ukraine in Avdiivka, which is they precipitated the fall of Avdiivka by hammering the crap out of the Ukrainians using guided glide bombs, and an absolute ton of them. That's what Ukraine needs. They need an absolute ton of guided glide bombs. They need to be making them themselves much more cheaply than buying the French or American equivalents. I mean, they're very good, the French AASM hammers, super effective, and very precise. They have a bit of propulsion as well, but they are super pricey. Now, I don't know what to include this in. It might well be something to do with strikes, but train traffic in the Leningrad region towards Luga has been stopped again, says Max25. On the night of October the 7th, train traffic on the Stroganovo and Mzhinskaya section towards Luga was once again stopped. The reason for the stop is called illegal interference by third parties. Now, this could be sabotage, but it could be strikes. In fact, Tim White now says this morning, it seems something may have happened in St. Petersburg and Leningrad region. An awful lot of train delays and rerouting due to technical issue. There has been sabotage here before. So quite possibly sabotage, but lots of railway issues for the Russians. Okay, moving on to Russian strikes onto Ukraine. And last night was another bad night for the Ukrainians in terms of interception. You look at this, 154 missiles, only 88 intercepted. So that is 54 plus 12, that's 66 drones getting through. That is not good enough. A 63% interception rate. Could not intercept 2 ballistic missiles, apparently, were also sent as well, not included on that infographic. Only 88 out of 140, with 12 drones still flying at the time of reporting. So some of those may have been shot down. Could change that percentage a wee bit, but it's just not. It's not good enough for the Ukrainians. They need to be intercepting more, because these drones are just causing all sorts of pain and suffering. Shad drone attacks on Poltava region damage an enemy an energy facility. Again, the Russians going for energy, leaving part of the area without power. Regional head Philippe Kogut reported drones also struck a locomotive depot, damaging several train units. So we are seeing a consistent focus on railway infrastructure. That happened the other day up in, Chernihiv, Sumy, as I think all over. Railway is being targeted, but energy infrastructure is number one on the list, I think. So, Russian attack on Poltava last night. Thankfully, no one was injured at that railway depot. Situation's getting worse in a Chernihiv border region in northern Ukraine, says Tim White. Another big hit on a power plant in Pryluki. No photos there, but that's cut electricity to over 60,000 more households. There's quite a lot of discontent about how things have deteriorated here. It is horrible. Honestly, I think there's an element that the gloves are off now for both sides, and I think Russia is just doesn't give a damn about the human cost here. It's just going to start obliterating towns and cities wherever it can. I have a bad feeling about the next few months, and I think Russia just doesn't care and will just obliterate whatever it can. This is a real concern for the Ukrainians. So again, it goes back to, and I wonder whether the Ukrainians realize this and the Americans realize this and Europeans realize this, and that's why there's all this talk about Tomahawk cruise missiles. I did a breaking news last night and this morning. It looks like they are getting Tomahawks, but they're going to see, about what Ukraine is going to hit. Unfortunately, they've telegraphed this idea that if Putin reacts badly, then they won't allow them to be used inside Russia, which means what? Just inside Crimea and the occupied territories. They need to be used at Yelabuga to stop this like this happening every night. Yelabuga has to go. End of. I keep saying it. I'll say it ad infinitum. Yelabuga needs to be blown up. Right, power outages also in Kharkiv, as that took a hell of a beating again last night. Here says 12 explosions, actually 18 explosions was later reported, maybe even more as the night went on. That was 11:35 last night local time, so it could well have received an awful lot more attention from the Russians, very close to the border, so it's very easy to target. Sloviansk near the front line, big explosions were heard there. Locals say Russian drones probably hit the town's technical college. Another view of the massive explosions which have rocked Sloviansk, says Tim White there. I'm not playing them with the sounds, obviously, for reasons of getting censored by YouTube. So I think a really challenging night last night for the Russians. I think the Ukrainians are plugging away every night as well. Some nights with, like 2 nights ago, real success. Last night it looked like there was a fair bit going on too. Nearly half of Russian refineries have been hit, says Noel Reports, referring to I don't know which resource this is actually. It doesn't say. Yes, so nearly half of Russian refineries have been hit. Fuel exports are crashing and the Kremlin can't stop it. 60% of Ukraine's deep strikes are carried out by the FP1 drone, so Firepoint, this company that's making drones, and the Flamingo missile, maybe the FP2, which is a smaller missile as well. And now Kiev is fielding the FP5 Flamingo cruise missile with a range of 3,000 kilometers and a 1,150 kilogram warhead. There were claims from Zelensky yesterday that 2 nights ago they were using missiles and drones, so missiles are definitely being used. We also had the report last night that, and we'll come to this a little bit later, that Tyumen, 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine, was hit. And I was wondering about the calculation because I did an AI calculation, but it did it from the western borders, and I missed that, and it said 2,000 kilometers away. So it may have been shorter, may have been within range of the FP1s, sorry. But actually, and the FP1s have a 1,600 kilometer range. But someone did the calculation and said, no, it is a 2,000 kilometer range to that, I think a refinery was it, in Tyumen, and that suggests that the Ukrainians might be using something other than drones to do some of their strikes. Well, talking about other than drones, Russian sources say that Ukraine has been using decoy drones during recent attacks to further exhaust or overwhelm air defenses. This needs to happen. The Russians have been doing this very successfully with Shaheds. So when we hear 500 Shaheds being sent into Ukraine on a particular night, it'll be interesting to know how many of those are decoys. Quite a lot of them, it does appear. are decoys, obviously then attracting Ukraine to spend a lot of money and shooting them down, and they're actually cheap as chips to send up. Now, Russian media report that drones attacked Nizhny Novgorod last night and Dzerzhinsk. That's 2 nights in a row, it appears. Dzerzhinsk has been hit. I think it's it's explosives chemicals plant in Dzerzhinsk. Is that the one? Makes hex and other explosives and whatnot. Locals heard at least 15 explosions during the night. It was also loud in Nizhny Novgorod. Temporary restrictions on the arrival and departure of aircraft were introduced at the airport. I think that's Yaroslavl airport, but I may be wrong. Igor Sushko reports that Ukraine was striking Belgorod last night with US-supplied HIMARS Gimlers missiles. So guided multiple launch rocket systems being used to strike at Belgorod because the city is close enough at the border to do so. Close enough to the border, just like Kharkiv, very vulnerable. And I think the Ukrainians are, like I said earlier, gloves off for the Ukrainians as well, where they're just going to start hitting energy infrastructure. I think they've had a pretty difficult time in Belgorod. There are claims that certain areas have not had electricity for sort of 3 days and whatnot. City is located 40 miles from Kharkiv, Ukraine, which is just across the border. So going back to Dzerzhinsk, at least 2 strikes on the Sverdlov plant. That's that plant I was telling you. So twice that's been hit in 2 nights. So yeah, obviously something of high value there. In the Obyan town in the Kursk region, just north of the border, north of Sumy, parts of the city lost power after a drone strike there. So again, I think the Ukrainians happy to go for Russian energy production and distribution. And then we had this video that came out last night. This was Belgorod, where an air defense missile, no, it wasn't Stary Oskol in Russia. It is in Belgorod region, but not the city of Belgorod. It's a city of almost 250,000 people. And we have an air defense missile that absolutely slams into a Russian apartment block. And this is not for the first time. In fact, Belgorod, the city, has had this happen a number of times where they've had Panzer S-1 rockets embed themselves in residential buildings. Here, an air defense missile took out the top of a building, and they later claimed it was debris from a drone attack. And of course, you know, the camera never lies, as we can say. So I don't think they're telling the truth, the Russians there. Right. Russian channels report a drone attack. They say drone attack on Tyumen oil refinery located 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine. So that's interesting. In addition, 3 drones were reportedly detected and neutralized in the ATPGEO industrial estate. So that's the same kind of general area, which means multiple drones going 2,000 kilometers, which, if they are really drones and not something like the Flamingo, then the Ukrainians have increased the range of their longest range drones, as far as I can work out. I thought the Lyuty at 1,600 was probably the extent of their range, but clearly another 400 kilometers can be added, unless they fired them from somewhere like Kazakhstan, which would be incredibly controversial, as you can imagine. Now, I didn't report yesterday, or I didn't show you this picture. This was Janko, which is one of these very important hubs in the northeast of Crimea that connects Crimea to Kherson in terms of road and railway. It also houses a number of air bases and whatnot. A powerful explosion was heard there 2 nights ago, Janko, and that's the smoke rising over the village of Azovskoye, where Russian troops regularly stockpile ammunition, and where there have been several incoming strikes. Well, we hear then later. So here's a roundup of what happened 2 nights ago, or a bit of a roundup. Multiple Ukrainian drone strikes hit military and fuel sites across occupied Crimea. So we heard 2 nights ago loads of things getting hit in Crimea. Russian troop site near Udachny was hit, wounding 4 soldiers. Another strike near Novostepne targeted an S-400 radar. And that could have been that radar we saw earlier in the video. There were claims that a radar was hit yesterday. Yesterday morning I claimed that. And near Janko, and this is where we're talking, an S-400 launcher was destroyed with minor damage to the command post. So this footage might suggest, or this image might suggest that, well, it could be that that's the S-400 launcher being destroyed and command post also being damaged there. Right, Feodosia, which was the biggest oil depot, I think, in Crimea, that was hit majorly 2 nights ago, still burning yesterday. And indeed, I believe it's still burning this morning. Occupied Crimea, Russian fuel depot continues to burn. After last night's strike, that was Igor Sushko, yesterday daytime around, well, I mean, he was posting that yesterday evening, so that was throughout the day. But we hear fire at Fedosia, oil depot struck by Ukrainian drones on the night of October the 6th remains active. Flames have spread to additional storage tanks, with 4 large ones now at risk. Tanks marked in red were hit in previous strikes, while those in yellow are threatened as the fire risks spreading. So these ones were previously taken out, and then you've got another set of tanks there, very vulnerable with the strikes. I don't know which ones are actually on fire there and which ones are not, but yeah, looking challenging in Feodosia, still burning now. And then we have this, so going back to the and sorry, everything's all a bit all over the place at the moment. Antinipinsky oil refinery, this is one in Tumen that was hit at over 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine. It's a claim here from Igor Sushko. The refinery is connected to 3 major pipelines going west and east. So that is a major refinery hub there. And you can imagine why that has been targeted. Although, you know, as mentioned, it is an awful long way away. Some damage to it, but who knows how extensive that is. And then finally, for this section, Reuters confirmed that the shutdown of the main distillation unit at the Kurishi oil refinery in Leningrad following a drone strike that happened a couple of nights back. I can't remember when, 3 or 4, but I think this has been hit a number of times. Russia's second largest refinery by capacity. Experts say it'll take about a month to repair. That is going to hurt. A month of having that out of action and all of the output that goes with it. There's likely to be small but noticeable effect on gasoline production too. People are saying they really need to work on diesel production and hitting diesel facilities, because that's really what the commercial, industrial and military economy depends on. Okay, going on to just a few other bits and pieces. I've wondered about this, and I can't believe this is the first one I found out about. This has to be a major worry. Russian who joined Ukraine's military, so it's going to be something like the Freedom of Russia Legion or the Russian Volunteer Corps. So a Russian who joined Ukraine's military has been detained over suspected espionage. The man detained in the western city of Lviv is suspected of helping Russia's Federal Security Service, the FSB, coordinate strikes on his unit's temporary base and nearby positions in Lviv Oblast. He's not going to be treated in the highest of regard by Ukrainians, is he? He's a Russian who's already been probably detained once and then said, no, it's all right, I'm going to join the Russian Volunteer Corps, and then acts on behalf of Russia by spying for them. Yeah. Igor Sushko reports that Russian electricity infrastructure is entering a systemic crisis. So this goes beyond the strikes on energy, power production and distribution. It says with a capacity shortage of 25 gigawatts, which is 9% of their energy production and growing, caused by network overload, worn out equipment and sanctions that have restricted access to technology. They are in trouble, it appears, and not just because Ukraine have been striking, but from chronic underinvestment and lack of maintenance. So that's according to the Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service, take it with a pinch of salt. And then, as someone says, and kinetic sanctions are just beginning. So, add to those load issues and maintenance issues what Ukraine is now starting to do with Russian power production and distribution, and that could actually accelerate to be a really significant problem for the Russians. Now, Andris Kubilius, who's a European Commissioner for Space and Defence, has announced that German intelligence has obtained relevant evidence indicating that Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin are discussing a potential attack against NATO. Although it's currently unknown if these are only discussions or if preparations are being actively made for a direct conflict with NATO and the US. In other words, don't know, they're just kind of discussing this around the fireside. Let's talk about what might happen if we were to attack NATO, or whether it's like, we are going to attack NATO and this is what we're planning. Is it just sort of wargaming? So who knows yet, but that is some serious intelligence that has got to the Europeans there and might carry with it some major consequences, or might not. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you so much for watching. I just want to see actually if there's anything, because things often emerge as I'm doing my video. Oh look, donkeys being used to transport there. Another video of that. Pretty normal. Rarog, that's a video. Yep. Italy will request a truce in all war zones during the 2026 Winter Olympics. Yep, that's all pretty normal. Yeah, where's that? Map of recorded Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian territory in September. You can see how far they have gone. Yeah, quite a distance there. And Thales arms maker delivers a new missile to Ukraine designed to take out Russian drones. The weapon has a maximum range of 3,000 meters and is designed to counter Shahed-type attack drones that Russia has used extensively against Ukraine. So that's going to be something they would definitely going to want to get their hands on. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to add. Anyway, thanks so much for your assistance with the Car for Ukraine campaign, the autumn harvest. We, Jonathan Fink and myself, are going to do a 12-hour live stream on Friday, 12 o'clock midday UK time to 12 midnight. And that was going to happen. I hadn't talked about that so far. Jonathan Fink's sort of organising that. And it turns out my missus has booked us to go to the cinema and we're going to have a meal beforehand. A real rarity, but for my birthday, I wanted to go and see a film called I Swear, which is about quite a famous guy with Tourette's in the UK. And it's supposed to be an amazing film. Really want to go and see that. And she's gone and booked it on for the Friday. And so I'm going to have like a 4-hour hiatus from doing that, maybe come back for the ending. But anyway, I don't know the exact details because Fink is sorting all of that out from Silicon Curtain. But watch out for a 12-hour marathon fundraiser and sort of reporting on the war in Ukraine. I don't know. Obviously, you dip in and out unless you are proper hardcore. But it's to try and raise money and get us over the line for the... and I think there'll be a number of people involved in this campaign with the live stream there. It won't just be me and Jonathan and me. So we are now approaching 14,000. Thank you so much, by the way, for those who have chipped in just of late. We have oh my goodness, so who did I say yesterday? We got up to Klaas Schukamer, thank you very much. Catherine Kloss, awesome sauce. Franciscus van den Hoek, thank you. That's an incredibly generous contribution as well, Franciscus. Goran Sem, thank you, and thanks for your love, my man. David Mills, awesome, and Mark Bisque, who is like one of the greatest humans on earth. Thank you to all who care for and support Ukraine. Mark and Olena, they are both lovely. Should do another live stream with them at some point. So thank you to all those people, and thank you to all the people who have contributed so much to this campaign so far. Really, really appreciate it. In the meantime, take care. Speak soon.